The following story is also available as a read-only version. Check the link in the description if you're interested. Of all the impossible places he'd seen, Idong Monastery was certainly the most unlikely to exist. Yet, here it was. A gargantuan structure, located far away from civilization, outshining the magnificent landscape surrounding it with radiant beauty. How could the monks in here maintain such a structure? And where did they even come from in the first place? Milos Histo had many questions as he stepped through the open gate. Several young men and women in green robes greeted him with deep bows, and the question of whether they stood by the gate all day waiting for the occasional visitor arose. Was this all they did? They seemed utterly unfazed by a servosphere, which normally earned him curious looks even in the most cosmopolitan of places. The pumpkin-sized silver ball fluttered around him, apparently inspecting its surroundings, waiting for orders from its master. "You are the wizard," said a voice in flawless story. There wasn't even a hint of an accent. "We've been expecting your arrival for quite some time now." A short, dark-skinned man with a bald head and white beard emerged from a narrow doorway. His robe was of a shining orange, and his eyes had the grey haze of someone gone blind many years ago. However, the old man looked at him directly, just like someone who could see perfectly fine. "I have to admit that is mildly disconcerting," said Milos. "Especially seeing as I haven't told anyone about my journey." The old man laughed. "Great power makes waves, like a stone falling into a pond. If one listens to the water, one can learn many things about the future," he explained. "Interesting." Milos nodded, a frown on his face. "Magalocation is not a topic I am well versed in, but I do know enough to understand that I, a being with almost no ability to channel mana, should not be making any ripples in the pond at all. As you have quite accurately pointed out, I am a wizard, not a sorcerer." The old man shook his head. "I'm not speaking of magic, but of time. The power you have is capable of having great impact on many lives. Those are the waters I listen to. Now tell me, what has brought you to our monastery?" Half an hour later, Milos and the old man, whose name turned out to be Guomo, entered a gigantic archive. The room was comparatively narrow, but it was extremely tall, with aisles of bookshelves accessible via stone walkways and ladders. Uncounted ledgers, volumes, and ancient scrolls were densely packed in a library so impressive it would have made some universities blush. Yet it was here, in the middle of nowhere. Most of these tomes were unique, exotic, and above all, invaluable. If he was entirely honest, Milos thought that each and every one of them was wasted here. "The knowledge you seek can be dangerous in the wrong hands," said Guomo, guiding Milos to the right section of the archive. "Are you afraid I will use it for personal gain? Sadism, maybe?" The question was not entirely serious. If Guomo knew he was a wizard, he probably also knew he was an officer of the law. "It is not my place to judge such things," the old man said. "This archive is open to anyone who visits." "I'm glad that's the case. Speaking of, how much will this cost me?" Guomo frowned. "You know, how much money do you want for this? And in which currency would you prefer it?" "None. We do not deny knowledge to those who seek it." Guomo stopped and pointed at a column of bookshelves. "I trust you will have no issues deciphering the scripture of obscure civilizations?" "I have my ways," Milos responded. "Which reminds me, how is it that you speak such flawless Listori? It's not like my homeworld is anywhere close to here, nor is the language particularly widespread." "The master taught me," Guomo explained. He has taught me many languages over the years. So you're not the boss of this place? Please, I am the lowliest of the master's servants. Guomo bowed, then recused himself. Milos was alone. What an odd fellow he was. The book he was looking for was easy to find. A massive lexicon, bound in black leather, decorated with plates of carnelian and soapstone. Though he could not read the title, Milos was familiar with its description. He heaved it onto a stone table, opened it, and called for his servosphere. "Can you make this readable?" he asked the floating ball, and it gave a high-pitched whir in response. It projected a spot of soft, green light on the open pages, and the tiny, round letters arranged in erratic patterns slowly morphed into sentences Milos could read. Of course, the first page was an index. It was one of the things almost universally true on all worlds. With a winning grin on his face, Milos got to work. Hours later, he was surrounded by 7 books in different scripts, scribbling away on several sheets of parchment. All of them featured blueprints with circles in some form or another, though what was inside of them varied vastly from book to book. Milos took the largest one, grabbed a vial of ink, and spilled it on the page. The servosphere winced, complaining that it could no longer read any of the words. "Relax," he said, holding his hand over the page. As he mumbled incantations, the ink began to shift, aligning itself with the original printing on the page. When it looked exactly the same as before, Milos raised his arm, and the ink left the page, now floating in the air. Carefully, he lowered it onto an empty sheet of paper, making precise hand movements, and pressed it in. The result was a perfect copy. "Demonology," a woman said behind him. "Interesting topic." Milos jerked around, only to see one of the girls that had greeted him at the entrance earlier. She had a wooden bowl in her hands, steaming soup inside. He noticed how incredibly hungry he was. "Oh, thank you so much. It's really not necessary." He pointed at the servosphere. "I've got food in there." "Well, I've got food in here, so..." She held up the bowl and put it down on the table next to him. "Interesting selection," she noted with a gesture toward the books. "Though I haven't seen some of these before." "Yeah, I brought those myself." Milos pointed at 2 tomes right next to the soup. It tasted fresh, with a sour note. The meat seemed to be crab, though he had to wonder where one captured crab high up in the mountains. "I store them in the servosphere. It's got a pocket dimension." "Fascinating," the girl said. It sounded as though the servosphere was the most boring thing in the world, and not the preferred topic people inquired on whenever Milos was at a dinner party. "What are you working on?" "Demon, obviously," Milos grinned. "It's been used as an assassin in a series of murders. Very dangerous being, not much literature on it. Hasn't left the abyss in millennia. Whoever bound it had access to some serious knowledge. The soup was delicious. We don't know why, but we do know it's still out there. So the primary goal is to trap and contain it. One of the books speaks of a dangerous snowball effect that can happen, but it doesn't specify what it is." "How does it kill?" the girl asked. "Suicide," Milos answered, taking a good sip of the soup. Its creamy freshness was odd, but tasty. "It makes people so depressed they end up killing themselves. Gruesome, too. Not sure how yet." He took the bowl in both hands and downed the rest in 3 drags. "Are you sure about that?" asked someone else behind him. It was Guomo, a strange expression on his face. There was something off about his voice. He hadn't spoken Listori this time, but Milos was not sure which language he had used. Feeling a burning sensation in his throat, he looked back at the girl, only to find that she had vanished. Instead, There was a large window through which he could see the bright skyline of Harthas at night. He turned to Guomo, only now realizing that he wasn't in Idong Monastery, but in his own apartment. The bowl slipped through his fingers and broke on the floor. It was not made of wood. A small amount of whatever had been inside it sizzled and burned the panelled floor. It certainly wasn't soup. The book he'd copied on was not a tome on demonology, but a book filled with pages and pages of suicide notes. Guomo grabbed it, and it disappeared in his robes. He pointed at the note Milas had copied onto the paper on his desk. "Suicide by professional pressure. This is one of my favorites," the old man said. "I don't kill with depression. I kill with comfort." Milas tried to say something, but the only thing coming out of his throat was a terrible croaking sound. His stomach felt like it was on fire. Paralyzed, he collapsed and fell to the ground. For the record, the snowball effect happens because when I make a kill, I kill everyone who could find out about me. One by one, witnesses and investigators die, and those who look into their deaths die as well. Unless they make precautions, the last person I kill is the person who summoned me. Maybe, in your last moments, it'll give you some satisfaction to know that this particular one did not. Then again, there's a lot of people on this world. He might die of old age before I get to him. But Milas was already dead. If you liked this story and would like to hear more, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. A new short story is uploaded every Wednesday, and there will occasionally be another one in between if I find the time. Thank you very much for listening and have a great day.